In this video, I'm going to show you how to easily remove the carburetor from a HUSQVARNA leaf blower model 125B, as well as how to rebuild it, and give some explanation on the parts, what they do, and what the different colors of the fuel pump diaphragm signify. How to know if you need to do a carburetor rebuild or cleaning before you go and take everything apart. Make sure your air filter is clean and your fuel filter, obviously that's clean too, since this isn't as easy as something like a lot of old weed eaters, string trimmers. In the case of these leaf blowers, first you have to remove the air filter, obviously. Oh, that's good. Surprisingly, I barely even run that thing. Make sure your fuel cap is nice and tight. You're going to need a T25 Torx screwdriver. You're going to be removing the impeller guard first. This is why it's more difficult than the weed eaters, that you can just remove the carburetor directly. These ones you have to remove the impeller guard, clamshell, the trigger, throttle line, then general fuel hoses. Then you can just pull the carburetor right out once you loosen up the mounting bolts. We'll be getting to that here in a second. I'm going to give some tips on when you reinstall everything, so you don't end up having a rather catastrophic problem of your stuff falling apart. When you remove this, try to pull it up directly and be careful, because here's your recoil start assembly here, so try not to screw that up. It's not easy to screw up, I'm just saying that so you don't be too aggressive with it and really screw it up. And for the clamshell, looks like you have just 3 bolts. One's behind your throttle set. I usually just engage the throttle set a little bit. Looks like these are Allen keys, so I have to go find the right Allen keys. That's always fun. I'm going to be skipping forward this part of the video so you don't have to watch me try to find the right size. Seriously? The first one I actually pick is the right one. Wow, that never happens. Make sure you don't lose any of the screws. Finding the right screws for these machines, they tend to use weird sizes. It's not super easy to find. I'm holding the grounding strap here so it doesn't fall out. This is just kind of in here, slides in here. I'm trying to remove this in a way that this doesn't fall out so I don't have to mess with it trying to get it back in. Here's your trigger, throttle lever. We're going to get a Sharpie and we're going to put a witness mark on this. There we go. Makes it a bit easier to put everything back together right. And we're just going to wiggle that out. Now there are 2 hex nuts behind the air filter that we have to remove. They're what's holding the carburetor body on, as well as the air filter box. When you go and reassemble this, let's say you've already done all this and it's not starting, make sure you tighten those bolts down properly. If that gasket that's between the carburetor and this one has an adapter, and the adapter isn't sealing right, it's not going to start or going to run poorly. So just be aware that that might be your issue. your choke select will get caught on the breather box that goes in the slot here. So be aware of that. Your primer bulb, can't quite remember the name of it when it's not on the carb body. Don't try to pry that out unless you need to replace it, since it can be real finicky to try to get back in. Now you have your two fuel lines, one up here, one down there. It's a really good idea. Put a witness mark, say, on the clamshell other half. Let's put it up here and then one here. That way we know which of the two ones the lines go to. If you get it reversed, it can be a hassle trying to diagnose it, but it's not any disaster or anything. To remove them, simple pair of forceps. In there, back onto it, rotate it back and forth, and wiggle it off. Sometimes these feel like they're kind of glued on, so you might have to rotate them a full 180 degrees before they break their seal. I'm going to flip this around so I can see. I know you can't see, but it's a bit too difficult to do it when you can't see anything. One. Then you have your other one that's coming from the fuel tank. Show this to you. From the fuel tank grommet to the bottom of the carburetor. Really up in there. I'm remembering why this was such a pain in the ass. I did this last time. There we go. And there was some fuel pressure in there. Just let me wipe that out. Now, spin this around so you can see what I'm doing. Just going to pull this right off. Since there's a gasket that's under quite a bit of pressure, they're usually pretty well on there. I'm going to stop the video and work this one off. It's very stuck on there. Alright, so what was the problem getting this off was the airbox gasket disintegrated. The areas around the holes tore off, got stuck in the threads, and since this is very tight clearance between the studs and the carb body, these holes here, they're kind of getting wedged in there, and that's why I was having a hard time pulling it off. So be aware of that when you repair yours. And this is the whole carburetor. I'm going to show it here for you. Got your butterfly valves here. This one's your choke. This one, the brass one, is your throttle lever. Where I'm going to reset the camera here. Okay. Let's start disassembling this. When you get a repair kit, make sure you get ones with both needle sizes and both colors of fuel pump diaphragms. One is actually a different material than the other one. The other one's actually much longer lasting and better functioning. Around here, pop this guy off. This side is your metering diaphragm. Disc behind it is a rivet. You have gasket that looks, typically when they're old, I've replaced this recently why it's not fused, but you have a gasket around here that will always go onto the body of the carb, so that's the right direction. Your rivet will always go towards the cover plate. So when you reassemble these with new parts, they'll be separate, gasket and whatnot. Make sure you get them in the right order. Otherwise it's not going to work properly. Let's go to the other side. And this side, this side is the one that most often has the problem. There is a fuel filter for the meter and needle. That oftentimes gets clogged. So I would check that before the meter and needle, because oftentimes that's your issue. The next most oftentimes is the metering diaphragm. Right here is your fuel pump. Your fuel pump diaphragm. Real carefully pry that off. Yeah, gasket here. I don't have a replacement gasket, so I'm just going to leave that guy on. But if you're rebuilding this, you want to pull that gasket off, clean out any gunk within these tiny channels here. Now there'll usually be two different diaphragms colors. You have your black one, which is the oldest type and is the worst quality as far as performance and longevity go. And then they have a clear one. This is why I said to get the kit with both of them. Generally, you can't get the kit with just the clear one. That one's actually Mylar. It is the replacement of the industry standard Teflon one that they don't make anymore. And is better than the Teflon, which is significantly better than these black ones. Now, this particular carburetor uses, if I recall right, the small size, see if you can see it, little screw right here, which retains this arm, your lever. Underneath this little dot here is a tiny little spring. You're going to need a tweezers to do this job, and a lot of patience and steady hands, because unfortunately these are really, really tiny. Loosen up, don't go all the way. Put your thumb down, hold everything together. Since that kit that comes with it to rebuild it oftentimes doesn't have the right spring. Needle can be right, lever right, spring's not. Tiny, tiny spring, you don't want to lose that. And this tiny little thing right here, I guess you can see it. This guy right here, this is your needle. You can look at it under a magnifying glass to see if it is worn. It should be a consistent V shape all the way to the tip. Sometimes it gets kind of concave like that, on both sides. That's when you have to replace it. This is what I found annoying. The kit that I got that was supposed to repair this model of carburetor came with a long needle, not a short one. Funny thing is, the weed eater that has a different kit that came with a short needle actually needed the long needle from a different kit. So I would suggest getting both kits, since the needles and parts can, let's just say the carburetor's can have multiple parts from different model series. Yeah, it's annoying. Let's go get the parts. In the case of this one, for this blower, we have locating pins. One here, one here. Line up the outer shape. This way. No, that way. Put on the locating pins. Old trimmer I was repairing recently. It didn't have any locating pins. That was let's just call that interesting to try to fix. I got some debris here. This is that filter for the meter needle I was talking about on the fuel pump side. I'm not going to replace that because I've already replaced that not too long ago. And I'm going to be cleaning up some brake cleaner, which I'm not going to bore you with filming it, but basically I'm just spraying inside here, moving this back and forth, spraying here, here, in these. And there are some check valves that are non-serviceable. So if you're having really bad running issues, you can soak this in gasoline for a few hours, and sometimes it'll help loosen up those check valves. Alright, got the carb body all sprayed nice and clean. If you wanted to remove these, you just get a pick like this, pry in there. You'll rarely be able to get them out in one piece. And when you want to just reinstall them, put them in, brace against your thumb, flathead screwdriver, and then you'll kind of tuck it in, trying to keep it as straight as possible so it's nice and seated perfectly in there. When you go to reinstall this, take screwdriver. I'm sure people will probably get after me for doing that. But you have to hold this throttle control arm right out of the way, but not entirely. Sometimes they strike a different part and make it impossible for you to install this. How do you know when you need your pump diaphragm replaced? Which it's only like 3 hours, I'm going to see some wear and tear on it. Is there'll be a lot of cupping of the flaps. Give me a second here. I'll show you on the old diaphragm what I mean. You don't need to go crazy tightening these up either. Just snug it up. Use a good screwdriver, don't strip out your screws. This lever a bit. That fall out. And I was talking about on this diaphragm here. Gotta show you it. Catch the light. See how it's domed in the center there? That's when it's not too bad now, but when it's significantly more than that, about like 30 to 50% worse, that's when you need to replace it. Your flaps here and here and here, those will typically be cupped, maybe a little dome and there in the center. Then you have a ridge right here that goes to this chuck valve here. This will be probably 10 times the thickness of the piece. That's when that one's worn out. When it develops a ridge that thick. Building the carburetor isn't necessarily difficult job. It's just really finicky, and the only part that's really finicky is that needle and spring assembly. That's the one that's always a pain in the ass. Oh, actually I have a diaphragm now. Might as well go ahead and replace it. I'm already inside. And that does look pretty worn. When you compare the two, it's very hard to see, almost impossible on the camera, but actually, oh, nope, that's not the right diaphragm. This one uses a different one. Man, I wish these carburetors were more standardized than they are. Anyway, what I needed out of this kit, which I ended up having to buy an entire kit just to get, carburetors include both needle sizes, is the tiny needle, which this carburetor uses in particular, but other ones in this model series do not, even though it's included in the model series. I'll get a tweezers. I already know is worn out, because that's the whole reason why I'm doing this. When I rebuilt the kit last time, I did not have that needle. I'm going to take, wait a minute, 1, 2, 3. Shouldn't be 4. That's a screw. I don't know, I'll find out later. I don't usually do this out here because potential for losing parts is too great, but it's the only good place to film this. Yeah, this one's carb needle spring and these ones with cover plate. The carb needle one will have a dome underneath, a bulbous head type screw, where the cover plate will have a pan head type screw. Tiny little fork goes up. Okay, I don't know if you actually got all that because my camera decided to suddenly stop working. Anyway, I put this in. There's a tiny screw underneath here. Put it down after putting the needle in. Right straight down onto the spring. Held it down. Moved my thumbnail on the other end of this little. Come on, focus. See this little ridge here? Right there. Hold the thumbnail on the other side of that. Then you're going to allow arm to come up a little bit. You're going to reach in, grab the needle from up underneath, lift it up, try to align the fork here and to grab into that slot. Once it is, you move your thumb forward. Do not let go. Put the screw in, have it go all the way down till it's almost set before you move it. Otherwise, it'll just fly off. Because the screw just barely grabs onto that rod. Seems like there could have been 1,000 better ways to design carburetors, but that's how they make them for the past like 100 years or whatever. Now, we have our meter and diaphragm. Remember, disc always goes to the needle, rivet side always goes to the cover plate. See this hole here? Make sure that is clear. That will break a vacuum and pressure as this diaphragm moves up and down and that void expands and contracts. If that hole has been sealed, it will not work. I'll put in here three holes in this. Cover the 3 holes in the block. One of them is just drilled for, I don't know, whatever reason. So, and camera ran out of battery, so I didn't get to film this part. Yeah, making these long, helpful YouTube videos is really difficult with my whatever camera technology I can afford to use, which is not very much. To align these, you have your locator pin, put that on the cover plate. See how there's 4 holes here, but there's 1 here? That's where your locator pin goes. So you just slide this on and it'll fall into place. So get it right over that area. And then you put your screws on. Again, don't over torque anything. You don't need to go crazy with the tightening down. And that's it. You've officially rebuilt the whole carburetor. Well, the parts that can be rebuilt anyway. Alright, now that we got the carburetor all fixed up, we can go ahead and reinstall this. Choke lever towards the fuel tank. Slide this on. Make sure your gasket that's right next to the adapter on the engine side is in good condition and is properly aligned. Get these studs aligned. Partially install it, but not entirely. That way you can get this fuel line, you know, that really small one goes from the tank to the carburetor. That gap there. Reattach that. It's harder if you put the carburetor all the way on. Now, let's take this fuel line, go ahead and put that on before you mount the air box. It should be fine. Probably. And I guess we're going to find out. Slide your choke control lever through that gap in the air box. So you can see a bit better. I like it when we use, instead of studs, use just really long bolts. Yeah. Doesn't matter, kind of drop your nut in there. You can pull it out. Okay, in this case I have a little retrieval tool. It's very handy. Snug it down. Again, if this is not properly tightened down, you're going to have starting and or running issues. I need to go crazy with it. Just, you'll feel it start to, you feel the bolt seat, then quickly start getting what's the word for it? Resistance as you turn. Once you get a significant amount of resistance, then you stop turning. You'll notice that if you continue turning, after a few seconds, you'll be able to easily turn again. That's because parts are yielding, not good. Stop tightening at that point, or you're gonna break something. Line on there. Trigger, and you got your throttle control arm. Someone's calling me. Remember how we put a witness mark on this guy here? Makes it very easy to install in the right direction. Now we have your clamshell. Just going to put that on. Snug fit. Especially this thing that likes to fall off. This one's a little finesse. By the way, this is a factory. This is what I put on. It's this little tag that tells me spark gap size for when I'm working on the spark plug. I'm having to go look it up. In this case, it's 24. That's 24,000th of an inch. Okay. And I just realized how this is going to be a problem for me. My helpful thing has now become a really problem thing. There we go. All this together. Here's catching. Throttle set trigger. Hold that together firmly. Grab your screws. Screws for this one are your Allen keys. These ones you don't have to use Loctite. But when we get to those other ones, since they thread into a metal section, which this the case would be the engine block, those you definitely have to use thread locker. 2-cycle engines vibrate very intensely and they will back out. And since this has your recoil start system, if those back out enough for it to start missing and get not synchronized, it can cause problems. Not going to say it will cause problems, but let's just go ahead and avoid problems altogether. Okay, now I got the clamshell, 3 screws here, Allen heads installed. Now we're going to take the recoil assembly, put it straight down, hold it, very gently pull on the cord, and we're making sure the paws have caught on the assembly properly. If not, you can usually pull on the assembly while holding this down, wait for them to set, and let's see where the Loctite. So there. Use medium strength thread locker. Do not use high strength, do not use low strength, only medium strength. You don't need a ton of thread locker, just enough to coat half the length of the screw and just a quarter of its diameter. In other words, like 2 drops. It doesn't take much at all. Put the screws in the crossing pattern, not like this, in an X pattern. If you screw up the pattern which you put them in, it's just an extra precaution and doesn't necessarily mean you're going to destroy something. Again, you don't need to torque things down too terribly much. Find the point where it seats, tightens up, and let's just say another 1/16 of a turn once you feel it stop. Doesn't take much torque. And I'll grab a new air filter. And you've now completely rebuilt the carburetor and reinstalled it. And I think it's only been about 20 minutes if you're not trying to film and make a YouTube video about it. So it's pretty easy to do, and you don't have to pay someone to do it. It looks more intimidating than it actually is.